Hey, it's Mike with PriceActionTradingSystem.com. And it's Monday, it's February 11th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And um, this was mostly a downtrend. It played out. You can see the two-tiered channel working down. We actually got a little overshoot right here. Came up here, got a break, and then we moved down to a new low, and then we just kind of corrected. But really, from right about this point right in here, really from 9:30 to about just before 10 o'clock, we just went sideways after that. And you can see, but the two-tiered channel working down still played out. Early on, I wasn't sure if this may not be a midline down through here. So all I did was take a equal distance. You can see how I bring that down and just bring another line in there. I made it brown just because so I could differentiate it. I was showing this real early when there wasn't, we might have only had about this much price action at the time, so it was unclear exactly um, whether this was going to be a midline because we weren't getting back up to the trend line. So you had to be concerned that, hey, if we break through here, you just want to find your equal distance from these first two lines and put it here, and this could be a midline. But you can see in the end, you can see this midline here, it's in play all the way down. We just couldn't get back up here. The market was kind of weak, and that's when we got the overshoot. Then we moved up here, had a break of the trend line, moved all the way back down just before 2 o'clock, made a new low, and then I wouldn't say we necessarily reversed, but we had a two-legged correction there that lasted a little over an hour. And so the market's just about to close here. It's just at 315. So, but really, for all intents and purposes, from about a little after 9 o'clock on, we're just going sideways. And even here, you can see we're swinging back and forth above and below the EMA. You can trade that both ways. I didn't mark any trades to the long side. I didn't really like any of these um, setups to the long side, so you had to be a little bit careful about trying to get long in here. And so this is definitely a clear downtrend. Somebody else asked me about early on here why I drew these trend lines like this. Notice how I used the first swing here and how I just used the bars here. The main reason is that notice how this is an extended trend with single bars where there's only a couple of bars here and then we got a pretty good correction. So, and actually I drew this one, the price action was already printed because this really printed before 6 o'clock. So that's the main reason I drew it different. In hindsight, really, this one over here would have worked out better if I'd have drawn it like this. And you can see you got the break and a move to a new low, and then we reversed. Where this one, you're moving down, you got the break, and you got two legs down. So in hindsight, they would have looked better reversed if I'd have drawn them like so. Because then you come down, you get the break, a little trap, a move to a new low. And let's just see how they fit. I always test them on both sides. You see, this one doesn't quite fit as well on the low side as it did. And let's just see how this one fits. Yeah, that one fits pretty good, but there's just not many bars there. And that's the main reason, because you can see, like coming up through here, you got a nice trend of single bars, and here coming down, you got a nice trend of single bars. So that is the main reason that I drew them the way I did, because you can see how that plays out, and you can actually see how that fits real nicely too on both sides, and you get a little break. It just so happens you get two legs down on this one, but you get a little trap here. You don't really get a long setup, and then you get a little trap right here. There's technically a failed second entry long the minute it breaks lower, but you actually had another break higher before it broke lower, so that's a failed second entry long as well. So it still sets up your short pretty nicely, and there's really no long, so you really were better off to read this one this way. And on this one, you never really got a long either, but you can see it kind of fits down through there. And we did close outside right in here. It's not a real convincing close, but you can see it comes back in play down here. So that's why I played them that way. So if anybody else had that question, that's the reason. So, but anyway, in the end, you didn't need this brown one. Didn't come into play, but you want to have it there and be prepared for it either way. So, but really, you should have been playing this. If you'd have been playing this trend, two-tiered channel here or whatever, everything would have played out perfectly. And if you'd have wanted, you could have gone to this sideways. And, I actually have a trade in here somewhere late in the afternoon where I played it off that. But let's back out. There's not a lot of trades today because it's just a lot of little choppy, nothing almost. And so we'll back out a little bit and we'll go over the trades, and it won't take long today. First trade I saw was just right around 7 o'clock, a little bit after. And you had to be a little patient this morning. But notice we just basically made a double top here. And notice that new low, there's a first entry, there's a second entry. The reason I made this green and it's not a red short is simply because this trend line still looks like it's in play. There's no break and even attempted a new high yet. But this really looks like a range, and this is a double top over here, and it's really a lower double top, and it's a second entry. So, and we're a little bit away from the EMA too. So you may take this trade. And there was a little gap here, so you could have, and I actually got this trend line. Some of you will probably ask, why did I not start off the high like you usually do and then go through the close? Well, I got this trend line off these lows. Those gaps always tell you where there's a trend line coming through, and I drew that trend line right across there, and I drug it up, and it fit better there. So that's how I couldn't find a good trend line off the top, especially later on once you got past 9 o'clock. And when this thing was fitting perfectly here, down here right around 9 o'clock, and this turned down perfectly there too, I felt pretty confident that that was the way to go off the lows instead of off the highs. So this was really looking sideways early on. So you know, it's really hard to say if there was a trend, but if you draw that trend line and drag it up, it's fitting perfectly right through that close there. So that's how I got that trend line. And you can see it came back into play here. We got the overshoot, and then we came up here and we got the break, which is about an equal distance before we headed lower for a new. So that's how I got that trend line, just in case anybody's curious about that. But I drew that one green. It's a little bit aggressive. And then we're coming down. We're working down. You get a break and you move to a new low and you try to go higher once. And then you try to go higher again. If it breaks lower right here, you got that little trap and all right there. There's actually a second entry when it breaks higher right here, but you didn't really get anything but a tick, and so you're just kind of going sideways. It tries to go higher once, twice, and so there's really a second entry short there counting off that low. There's a first entry and a second entry, and there's that little tick higher that probably traps some people. So I like going short right there, hoping that it's going to run back down here to the lower side. It doesn't. You get more than enough to get your scalp. But this was a little bit of a long trap here, and there's no long there. So by sitting there and just watching, and then you see the little long trap. I tell you, it was tempting to go short right here when it broke higher again and went lower. That's a tempting short, but it's just a first entry, and this thing's kind of flip-flopping around, and the EMA is getting real flat. So you're better off just to stay out at that point. Just sit tight, see what happens. And notice it does run up here, and it makes a second entry short right in here, but it ends up going lower and then going higher again. But it finally turns down right off the trend line, but you just don't really get a good chance to go short. It comes back and you get a failed second entry here. That's very tempting, and it would have worked, but look at all that support right across there, and you just bounce 2 times in a row. That's really dangerous to go short right there. Like I said, it ends up working out, but most times it won't. So you can't really take a trade there, and it's sad, but you just have to kind of watch that. And it comes down here, and where does it bounce? Right where you think it would. And then you get a first entry. You run up here, you get a second entry short right at the midline. And that midline's playing perfect. You can see prices bouncing off that thing, both sides, all the way down through here. And with that second entry, and if this was a trend working up through here, which it looks like it is, you got an overshoot. But the main reason is you got a double top there and a second entry short, and that's a fairly bearish bar. There's a lower high right here, but now you're just kind of stacking up right at the EMA, or the midline, I'm sorry, and the EMA. And look how flat that EMA is getting again. This almost looks a lot like a repeat of this, so just kind of stay out of it. There's too many dojis and things there, and you actually get another second entry right here. but we still haven't got back up here. And, you know, even though we got a break and a new high, I would wait for a lower high, and you don't really get one here. You don't get a lower high until we're down here off the bottom again. Then, of course, it bounces. And then we got that, look how we're just stacking up there again. But this one's a little different. Notice you're working up and you get a first entry, then you start going higher and you get a second entry short right there. But you've broken this trend line here. You made a new high and you got a pretty bearish bar. I drew this one green because this is technically your signal bar. And I'm not crazy about inside bars, but it is a second entry and this thing's continuing to go down, and a couple of times, you know, we've bounced. We've made a, you know, we hadn't got back to the trend line and turned down, and it almost looks like a repeat. So you might take that second entry short right there. Again, I drew it green, but if you do, you go short one tick below the red bar, but your safety stop still has to go one tick above the high here, because that's your signal bar. And we're working down. You try to go higher once, try to go higher twice, and then you actually try to go higher a third time. But notice that's a new swing low. It's the first entry, second entry, and that's a fairly bearish bar. And we're making lower. Every time we've come back here, we've had a little lower high. So I think that one's worth risking to try to go short to ride it back down to here again. And sure enough, we get a little overshoot this time. You're working higher. And there's another second entry short right there. You could have taken this one and it would have worked, and it does look a lot like these others. The only thing is you don't get a break of this one and a new high. It just runs up here to about the same level and then turns down on the second entry. So you could argue for that one to be green because it's somewhat of a repeat on that second entry short, but the pattern's a little different. And notice how this one you come up, you get a break and a new high. This one you come up, you get a break and a new high. But this one you're still in that trend line. And so we're overdue to try to come back up here to this major trend line. And so I'm a little leery of that one. There's a lower high here, but now you're right back into the lows again. And you would have got burned on that one. But notice this, you got a new high. So first entry, this is a second entry long. And it turns back down here with a big bearish bar. So that's a failed second entry long, and you got a big bearish bar. And we didn't get back down to here last time. So I kind of like that one. Just trying to ride it back down to see if it's going to make that, if it's going to go lower or not. I was still, at this point with it coming below here, you're still thinking about that measured move down to that brown line. Maybe I should have left it on there. So that's the only reason I like that one. Then it runs up here again, and that's just a first entry. But you get your break and you're running up, and then you just start going sideways here. There's just too many bars stacking up here. This one's tempting, and it is a second entry short. If you took that one, it would have worked, but you would have had to ride it out a while. I'll mark it in green, because at that point you really had your first break. You see, that's what it would have looked like live. So you would have been coming up, you get a break, you get a new move to a new high plus a second entry short. Look at that swing low, first entry, second entry when it broke below there. So if you did go short there, it would have worked out, but it probably would have been hard to sit here and ride all this out sideways. I'm not sure if you'd have gotten out by when it broke lower here. But after that bar, I definitely wouldn't do anything but just sit tight, because that's just a little sideways congestion range there. And with that overshoot here, it could have broke higher. So look what finally happens. You finally break out to the low side and make a lower high here. And you come back and you test that breakout area, and it acts as support, and you get a big bearish bar. So I like going short right there. Trying to ride it down to that new low. Would have been good for a scalp. You wouldn't have got anything spectacular out of it. This was another possibility, but it's right into those lows, and we've bounced too many times. And it looks like it would have worked before it bounced, but it did come back just enough to stop you out there. So I'm not sure if there's quite enough. No, there's enough ticks in there. You could have scalped out there, but I just wouldn't take it right into where we bounced across there 3 times previously. And you can see, even though it went through. It didn't go far before it bounced, and that's why you got to be careful with those trades. You got to make sure you got enough room to get out there. And we're same thing. We're working higher. We get a break. We get a couple of legs up. We don't quite make a new high, and there is another second entry short right there. So that is another one that's a possibility. But we're just kind of starting to work sideways again there, and you don't have much room before that little double bottom. So I didn't mark it, and you see, even though you would have got enough for that scalp, it bounces there again, and that's what you expect to happen. But it won't always go far enough before it bounces. In this case, it did, and so and now we got a new low in place. So I don't think I would risk that to try to ride up yet, even though we got a new low, we got a break and a new low, because this is more sideways. And even though this was up here now, I probably would have had moved this down to right about there now. And so you don't have a lot of room back to there. Notice how it turned down on that first bar. It could have turned down and kept going lower, but it doesn't. It pushes on through. It pulls back right here and makes a little attempt to go lower that fails. So when it went higher here and went out the other side, I like going long there, just because you do have that break and a move to a new low, and you might catch that next run up. Plus you got this trend line working up through here, and it's bouncing off that is still in play on that little failed break lower there. So, and this is just after 2 o'clock. Normally I wouldn't take it, but it was so slow this afternoon. If you were hanging around looking for something, I wouldn't have a problem with you taking that trade where you're looking for that reversal there. And you can see, even though they came back and got the break-even stops, it did end up going higher. You actually get a couple of legs up here. It looks like 2 measured legs, matter of fact. There's one leg, and there's your other. No, we didn't quite get a measured leg. So anyway, not the greatest trading day, but there's still some nice, there's still some trades in there. And really, you just wanted to concentrate to the downside. And what you might have done, if you take this line and move it down to that swing right there, notice how prices are kind of playing both sides of that swing, and that would have helped you down through here. But you can see how prices are kind of playing both sides of that as well. But I still think this was your better place to have it. And that everything plays out that way as well. Your midline's perfect down through here. So this is one of those days where you just didn't have a real clear support or resistance. You had pretty clear support where it was bouncing every time, and that's how I got the line. But you didn't really have a real clear resistance of where it was turning down every time. It's like it dropped. Oops, you want to do that? We'll just erase that one. Make sure we get the same angle. But if you take that and drop it down, it plays out right down through there, kind of the latter part of the morning. And then you get a break and a move to a new low still. So you could have played it that way. And if you did, I mean, sometimes you just have to kind of play around with your lines, and you can see it really worked out and played out like it should the rest of the day. It's just like the trend line dropped. For whatever reason, the market got a little weak in here. It's not super weak because you see it couldn't get through the low side except just a little bit, but it did get weaker. So these days are a little harder to play because it takes a little bit of experience of how to find these lines on a day like this. And if you're new to this wasn't easy to find. So it's pretty obvious that we were making a down, that we were in a downtrend, making lower highs and lower lows down through here. And then it was fairly obvious we went sideways. So you probably should have been able to find this sideways stuff. But again, it doesn't turn down consistently at the same locations every time. It pretty much did off these highs. But down here, notice it's bouncing a little different. It's still kind of making lower lows and stuff. But that's because the bigger pattern was probably playing out, which was the 2-tiered channel that's been working lower almost all morning. So that's what I saw today. Not the best day. This is getting to be more kind of, and notice too that we're still hovering around this 2700. And that's pretty obvious. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty typical of what the market will do at these century marks. So we rallied up here, and we come back and we try to test that 2700. And you can see we were testing that line right across there just above 2700 all day long. Right here, we tested it a couple of times in the overnight. And then we came back and got pretty close here, but we just couldn't get down there. So anyway, that's what I saw today. I hope you had a good trading day. I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow, but I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you tomorrow.